The air in the intake holding area during power outage hung thick with the smell of damp paper and stale coffee, a scent made sharper by the sudden absence of ventilation. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my posture rigid, watching the clerk fumble with a battery-powered lantern. Its anemic glow danced across stacks of folders and filing cabinets, throwing long, distorted shadows that seemed to swallow the room's corners. My own shadow, stretched out like a gaunt stranger, swayed gently with the clerk's movements. "Just a moment, Seth," the clerk stammered, his voice laced with a nervous tremor that grated on my nerves. The power had gone out a full 10 minutes ago, plunging the municipal building into a frustrating, inefficient limbo. It was typical, I thought, of the entire process surrounding the inheritance. Nothing had been straightforward since the profound loss that had led me here. Every form, every signature, every conversation had felt like another brick in a wall I hadn't asked to build. My grief, a constant dull ache beneath my ribs, usually spurred me to action, to meticulous planning, to the imposition of order. As an architect, I thrived on structure, on the certainty of blueprints and stress calculations. But here, in this dim, stuffy room, surrounded by the chaos of an unplanned blackout, my usual coping mechanisms felt like trying to patch a dam with a single brick. I just wanted to sign the papers, claim the ancestral home, and begin the arduous, necessary work of bringing it back from the brink. The clerk finally located the right document, his finger tracing lines in the flickering light. Here we are, the transfer of the property at just a few more signatures and it's all yours, all of it. All of it, I echoed, the words tasting like ash. The old house, a sprawling, gothic monstrosity my distant great-aunt had stubbornly clung to until her final breath, was now mine. A burden, yes, but also a distraction, a concrete task to anchor me. I took the pen, its plastic cool against my palm, and signed where indicated, my hand steady despite the faint tremor in the air. Or perhaps it was just the clerk's unsteady breathing. Each stroke of the pen felt less like an acquisition and more like an acceptance of a sentence. The drive out of the city was a blur of highway and then increasingly narrow, winding roads. The landscape grew wilder, the trees taller and denser, their branches interlocking overhead like the ribs of some ancient petrified beast. The air itself seemed to change, growing cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. I hadn't seen the house in decades, not since I was a boy, dragged there for infrequent, awkward family gatherings. My memories were hazy, filtered through the gauze of childhood, echoing halls, the smell of dust and old roses, the unnerving gaze of ancestors in oil portraits. The house loomed at the end of the lane, silhouetted against a bruised, purpling sky. Ivy, thick as a man's arm, snaked across its facade, pulling at loose stones, obscuring windows like heavy green eyelids. No lights, of course. It had been vacant for months. I got out, the gravel crunching under my boots. It turned with a groan that seemed to reverberate through the very foundations of the house. The smell was intense now, not just dust and decay, but something else. Something subtly organic and cloying, like old flowers left too long in stagnant water. A wide, curving staircase dominated the space, its banister carved with intricate, unsettling figures that twisted into grotesque faces in the shifting light. I walked further in, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. My architect's eye immediately began cataloging the damage. Water stains, peeling wallpaper, a subtle tilt to the floorboards. It was a ruin, yes, but a salvageable one. A project. Then I saw it. In the corner of the foyer, just beyond the sweeping curve of the main staircase, a small, recessed alcove. It was barely noticeable, tucked away, almost an afterthought in the grand design. But what caught my attention wasn't the alcove itself, but the patch of wall within it. It was a section of newer plaster, stark white against the faded, peeling original. But it wasn't just new. It was too new, almost pristine, as if applied yesterday. And it wasn't smooth. Under the flashlight's beam, I could discern faint, almost imperceptible indentations, like a series of shallow, uneven gouges. They weren't from a tool, not a trowel or a brush. They were too random, too organic. They looked unsettlingly like the faint impressions of something being pressed against the wet plaster, something desperate. My pragmatic mind, so eager to categorize and understand, found no easy explanation. It was a detail that defied logic, a small, incongruous flaw in the ancient fabric of the house that felt less like a repair and more like a scar. The house was a project, I reminded myself. But as I stood there, staring at those inexplicable marks, I felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't just old age. This was something else entirely. I'd spent the better part of a week just looking at the house. Not just the exterior, though its gothic sprawl was impossible to ignore, but the interiors, room by cavernous room. Each space was a mausoleum of someone else's past, choked with dust motes dancing in slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy panes. My great-aunt had been a collector, or perhaps a hoarder. Every surface groaned under the weight of forgotten trinkets, faded photographs, and books whose pages had yellowed into brittle husks. My architect's brain, usually so adept at imposing order, felt overwhelmed. But that was the point, wasn't it? A distraction. A project. I'd brought my drafting table, my rolls of tracing paper, my finely sharpened pencils. I spent hours hunched over blueprints I'd painstakingly drawn from the old, faded schematics the estate agent had provided, cross-referencing them with my own meticulous measurements. I was going to strip it all back, reveal the bones, make it mine. The sheer scale of the task was a comfort, a weighty anchor against the swirling grief that still threatened to pull me under. It started subtly, a whisper, faint as the rustle of dry leaves outside, just beyond the threshold of hearing. I'd pause, pencil hovering over paper, straining. Nothing. Just the house settling, I'd tell myself, a creak of ancient timbers, the wind sighing through a broken pane. I was tired. That was it. Grief was an exhausting beast, and I hadn't slept properly in months. Then came the shadows. Not solid things, but quick, darting movements at the very edge of my vision. Always when I wasn't looking directly, always gone when I turned. My eyes playing tricks, I'd rationalize. The dust, the poor light, the sheer size of the place. My mind, overworked and under-rested, conjuring phantoms. The misplaced objects were harder to dismiss. My favorite measuring tape, left precisely on the drafting table, would reappear on the mantelpiece in the drawing room. My keys, placed on the hall table, would be found in the kitchen sink, nestled among the unwashed dishes. I'd retrace my steps, convinced I was just absent-minded, a side effect of my recent loss. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It felt deliberate, a subtle rearranging, a gentle nudge from unseen hands. I was in what had once been a small, rarely used study off the main library, a room filled with the scent of mildew and decaying paper. My plan was to clear it out, perhaps turn it into a dedicated workshop. As I pulled away a heavy, built-in bookshelf, its wood groaning in protest, I noticed something odd about the wall behind it. My architect's eye, honed for structural irregularities, immediately picked it out. I ran a hand over the panel, feeling a slight give. I pried at it with the edge of a chisel. It came away with a soft thunk, revealing a shallow cavity, barely large enough for a hand. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like ancient, dried-up potpourri, was a small, leather-bound book. No title, no author. Just a faint, almost invisible etching of a twisted, thorny vine on the front. I carried it back to my drafting table, the only place in the house that felt truly mine amidst the chaos. The hinges were stiff, resisting at first, but it opened. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, a cursive script that wavered and sloped across the pages. It was a diary, dated nearly a century ago. The entries were erratic, some detailed, others just a few frantic lines. It feeds on the quiet, on the echoes of what's lost. It takes the edges, then the core. My breath hitched. I read on, my gaze skipping through the increasingly desperate script. The walls are not stone, but memory, and they remember everything. My grief, it listens, not wind, not pipes. They want to wear my voice. As I read the last entry, the room around me seemed to shift. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen pressure. The elegant mahogany of the drafting table blurred, morphing into a rough, chipped metal surface. The meticulously organized blueprints scattered across my vision, dissolving into institutional gray walls, lit by the stark, emergency glow of a single flickering fluorescent tube high above. I was no longer in the study. The air was frigid, smelling of disinfectant and fear. A low hum vibrated through the floor, a sound that resonated deep in my bones. Panic, sharp and immediate, seized me. Where was I? How did I get here? My mind raced, trying to piece together a fragmented reality, a memory that felt both intensely real and utterly foreign. Then, as suddenly as it began, the illusion fractured. The flickering tube vanished, replaced by the afternoon sunlight filtering through the grimy window. The metallic scent dissolved, giving way to the familiar must of old paper. My hands were free, trembling, still clutching the diary. I was back in the study, the heavy scent of the house settling back around me like a shroud. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My breath came in ragged gasps. What was that? A hallucination? A flashback? My own mind, finally breaking under the strain? The diary lay open on the page, the cryptic words staring up at me, accusing. The cracks weren't just in the walls of this house. They were appearing in the very fabric of my own reality. I blinked, hard, rubbing at my eyes. When I looked again, the wood was back, its familiar grain a comforting, if now slightly suspect pattern. Just tired, Seth, I muttered, my voice thin in the cavernous study. Too much reading, not enough sleep. I pushed back from the table, the old chair groaning in protest. The journal, with its unsettling final entry, lay open before me, its words a dark stain on the otherwise ordinary page. I tried to dismiss the sensation, the brief, disorienting flicker, as a trick of the light, a symptom of exhaustion. But the air, once thick with dust and mildew, still carried that faint metallic tang. It was the sterile scent of something clinical. I needed a break, a walk. I needed to clear my head. But as I rose, a low creak echoed from the floorboards above, directly over my head. Not the usual settling of an old house, but a deliberate, heavy sound, like someone shifting their weight. I froze, listening. Nothing. Only the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Later that evening, after a sparse meal I barely tasted, I found myself in the main sitting room, attempting to distract myself with a book on structural engineering. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Then came the smell. It intensified, morphing into something cloying, almost sickeningly floral, like a funeral parlor after a long wake. It was thick, damp, and organic, utterly alien to the dry, dusty aroma I'd grown accustomed to. My stomach churned. A sharp crack from the corner of the room made me jump. A heavy, leather-bound book, one I'd placed securely on the top shelf of the built-in bookcase only hours before, had tumbled to the floor, landing with a muted thud and a cloud of disturbed dust. I stared at it, then at the empty space on the shelf. No draft, no tremor. It had simply fallen. Right, I mumbled, a tremor in my voice. Old house. things fall. I walked over, bent down, and retrieved the book. My mind, stubbornly trying to focus on the book in my hands, betrayed me. The scent of the decaying flowers intensified, then faded, replaced by that metallic, sterile tang, sharper now, more pronounced. It was the smell of fear, of waiting. Suddenly, the room around me dissolved. The ornate wallpaper peeled away, replaced by bare, institutional gray. The intricate molding of the ceiling became a grid of exposed pipes and flickering fluorescent lights, half dead, casting a sickly, uneven glow. I was standing, or perhaps kneeling, I wasn't sure, in a space that was not the sitting room. It was stark, utilitarian, filled with a low, constant hum of unseen machinery and the distant, muffled chatter of voices I couldn't quite discern. The air was frigid, biting, and thick with that metallic, sterile odor. I knew it with a sickening certainty, though I couldn't recall how I'd arrived. The disorientation was absolute. A memory, sharp and cruel, clawed its way to the forefront of my mind. The agonizing weight, the endless minutes stretching into hours, the crushing weight of helplessness. My wife, the call, the finality. It all washed over me, raw and immediate, as if it were happening again, right now, in this desolate, flickering space. A low moan escaped my lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. The metallic scent grew sharper, filling my lungs until I choked on it. Panic seized me. I thrashed out, my hands encountering nothing but empty, frigid air. I gasped for breath, but the air felt thin, metallic, offering no solace. The flickering fluorescent light vanished. The gray walls bloomed into the familiar, if now sinister, pattern of the wallpaper. I was back. I was on my knees, shivering violently, the book I'd picked up lying discarded beside me. The chandelier above me swayed gently, though no window was open, no door ajar. My rational mind, my meticulous, ordered mind, screamed for an explanation. A hallucination? A vivid flashback? The house wasn't just old. It wasn't just settling. It was awake. And it had tasted my grief. The house was reacting. It was aware. And my pain, my profound, consuming grief, was precisely what it wanted. Its familiar grain warm and solid under my palm. My breath, which had caught somewhere in my throat, slowly released. I blinked again, running a hand over my face. The wood was undeniably mahogany, rich and deep, just as it had always been. No cold, unyielding surface. It had been a trick of the light, perhaps. A momentary lapse in focus, brought on by too many late nights spent poring over blueprints. My mind, still raw from grief, was playing games. That's what I told myself. But the lingering chill in my fingertips, the phantom memory of that metallic tang, refused to entirely dissipate. A tiny, insidious seed of unease had been planted. I pushed away from the drafting table, the illusion of normalcy already cracking around the edges. This wasn't just my grief. This wasn't just exhaustion. The house, I realized with a fresh jolt of fear, was subtly, almost imperceptibly, changing. Or, more precisely, it was changing for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house held secrets, not just within its walls, but within its very foundations. And if it was capable of such disorienting tricks, what else might it be hiding? My meticulous nature, usually a source of comfort, now became a driving obsession. I needed answers. My initial research began innocuously enough, huddled over my laptop in the study, the house creaking around me like an old ship at sea. I scoured online archives, local historical society pages, digitized census records. The property's lineage was long and convoluted, a tapestry woven with names and dates that blurred into an indistinguishable pattern. But then, a flicker, a recurring motif in the local newspaper archives. Unfortunate incidents and mysterious circumstances, always tied to the property. vague enough to be dismissed as local superstition, but frequent enough to snag my attention. One entry, in particular, stood out. A short notice from the late 1800s. The sudden and regrettable disappearance of the proprietor, a Mr. Elias Thorne, from his residence on Willow Creek Lane. No foul play suspected, though the local constable remains perplexed. Willow Creek Lane. That was this house. A knot tightened in my gut. Online sources, however, were limited for anything truly old. I called the municipal archive, explaining my genealogical quest. The clerk, a harried-sounding individual, informed me that many of the oldest records, property deeds, family journals, local council minutes, had been temporarily relocated. Due to recent flooding, the voice crackled through the phone, and budget cuts, they're in a disused municipal building. It sounded like the kind of place forgotten things went to die. But my determination outweighed my apprehension. The next afternoon, I found myself standing before a squat, windowless brick building on the outskirts of town, its purpose long since faded from its decaying facade. My flashlight beam cut a shaky path through the gloom. Each shelf groaned under the weight of countless dusty boxes, their labels faded into illegibility. I sifted through brittle ledgers, yellowed newspaper clippings, and meticulously handwritten wills. The clerk had left a vague note about which section held the Willow Creek Lane records, but it was like searching for a single grain of sand on a forgotten beach. Then, I found it. I recognized a familiar surname, a branch that had owned the house for nearly 2 centuries. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the first one. The entries were sparse at first, mundane accounts of farm yields and local gossip. But then, the tone shifted. Not just disappearances, but sudden, violent deaths. A patriarch lost to the bog behind the house, his body never recovered. A young mother driven to despair and found lifeless in the attic. A child swept away by the creek, though the creek was barely a trickle that year. Each tragedy seemed to occur within a few years of a new family moving into the house, or after a significant life event like a birth or a marriage. The house seemed to demand something. And then, I saw it. A series of interlocking, irregular lines, almost like roots or veins twisting in on themselves, forming a roughly circular pattern that seemed to writhe even on the static page. It was unsettling, primitive, and utterly out of place amidst the formal script. I flipped through the journals, my heart starting a slow, heavy thrum against my ribs. There it was again, drawn lightly on a page describing a terrible sickness that claimed an entire family. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a signature of loss, a mark that seemed to preface, or perhaps even cause, the tragedies that followed. My family hadn't simply owned this house. They had been entangled with it, consumed by it. The house wasn't benign. It was a predator, and I, Seth, was its newest prey. The cold of the interior seeped into my bones, a chill far deeper than mere temperature. It was the kind of cold that seemed to hum with an ancient, malevolent energy, a silent thrum against my teeth. The entangled mark. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a signature of loss. The air hung thick and still, tasting of dust and disuse, a metallic tang beneath it all that scraped at the back of my throat. Moonlight, thin and watery, bled through a grimy window high above, casting the room in a spectral gray. Empty shelving units, long stripped of whatever records or supplies they once held, lined the walls like skeletal ribs. A single overturned wooden chair lay near the center, its legs splayed, a silent scream of abandonment. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but the ghost of one. A breathy current that carried the phantom scent of jasmine and rain. Her scent. I knew that smell. Knew it intimately. It was the perfume she always wore, light and elusive. A scent that had once promised comfort and home. The gray light in the room seemed to flicker, not from an actual power surge, but from some internal distortion. The overturned chair shimmered, its rough wood softening, rounding. For a fleeting instant, it wasn't a chair at all, but the worn armchair in our old living room, the one where she used to read, her head tilted just so, a stray curl falling across her cheek. I blinked, hard. It was impossible. My mind knew it rationally, but my heart lurched, desperate. Nothing. Then he was there. Not fully, not corporeal, but a shimmering outline, translucent as heat haze, standing by the far wall. Her hair, the rich auburn I remembered, fell around her shoulders. Her smile, the gentle curve of her lips, was perfect. Exactly as I remembered it. The vision solidified, gaining color, gaining detail. She looked at me, her eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It wasn't love, not exactly. It was pity, all of it. Regret? What was she talking about? My mind reeled. I had loved her fiercely every moment. The house was twisting things, sowing doubt. I knew it, but the image of her, so real, so her, was a potent weapon. The empty shelves blurred, reforming into the familiar bookshelves of our study, filled with the books we'd collected over years. He was closer now, standing beside the phantom bookshelf, running her fingers along the spine of a book, her movements fluid and graceful. Her face, too, began to subtly distort. "You built this, Seth. You built it all around me." Panic seized me. My fault? No, it wasn't my fault. I'd tried. I'd done everything. But the house fed on the cracks in my conviction, amplifying them, twisting them into gaping chasms of guilt. The memory of her final moments, the sterile hospital room, the weakening grip of her hand in mine. It all flooded back. But now, in this vision, her eyes were open, staring, not at me, but through me, filled with a silent, terrible judgment. The warmth in the room became unbearable, pressing down on me, stealing my breath. The air thickened, turning to a viscous, suffocating syrup. The metallic tang in my mouth grew stronger, coppery and bitter. This wasn't her. This was the house. It was using her, using my most cherished memories, my deepest regrets to break me. It was feeding on the despair it generated, growing stronger with every twist of the knife. My mind screamed in protest, but the visions were relentless, vivid, pressing in from all sides, each one a perfectly crafted barb aimed at my heart. The house wasn't just showing me my past, it was trying to trap me in it, to make me live it, perpetually, with all the pain and none of the solace. I could feel my own resolve fraying, the edges of my sanity blurring under the onslaught of its insidious embrace. The cold, hard reality of it hit me like a physical blow. That wasn't her, not really. It was a projection, a mimicry, a cruel, beautiful lie woven from my own memories. The house? It was a parasite, feeding on the very essence of my grief, twisting my love into a weapon against me. My stomach lurched, a sour wave washing over me as I stumbled back from the phantom bookshelf, the illusion dissolving into the familiar, oppressive wallpaper. I stood there, gasping, the air thick and heavy, like trying to breathe through a damp cloth. My hands trembled, not just from fear, but from a surge of desperate anger. This thing, this house, had taken enough. It had stolen my peace. It had tried to steal my sanity, and now it was desecrating her memory. No, I wouldn't let it. I had to fight back. But how do you fight a building? How do you fight something that lives in your mind, that breathes your sorrow? I needed something outside, something that hadn't been touched by its insidious tendrils. My phone, a lifeline I'd barely used since arriving, felt heavy in my hand. My fingers, surprisingly steady, scrolled through old contacts, then pivoted to a quick online search. local history, ancestral homes, unusual phenomena. The search felt absurd, like typing "how to fight a ghost" into a search engine. But then, a name popped up, attached to a dusty online article about local folklore and historical oddities. A retired archivist, known for delving into the less conventional aspects of the region's past. A long shot, but it was all I had. The call went to voicemail. I left a terse, almost frantic message, detailing nothing, only begging for a meeting, hinting at a family property, an urgent matter. It knew what I was doing. It knew I was reaching out. Hours later, my phone vibrated, startling me. It was the archivist. His voice, reedy and ancient, held a surprising note of cautious curiosity. He agreed to meet, not at his home, but at a neutral location. A small, out-of-the-way diner on the edge of town. He said he had heard things about my family's ancestral estate. My stomach clenched. Heard things? What kind of things? The diner was quiet, smelling of stale coffee and fried food. The archivist was exactly as I'd pictured him. Slight, with thick glasses perched on a narrow nose, surrounded by stacks of well-worn books even at the diner table. His eyes, though, were sharp, piercing, as if they'd seen too much history. I spoke, my words tumbling out in a rush, a jumbled confession of the house's manipulations, the memories, the grief. He listened, his gaze unwavering, occasionally nodding, taking notes on a small pad. He didn't scoff, didn't interrupt with platitudes about stress or imagination. That, in itself, was a glimmer of hope. "Your family's property," he began, his voice low. "It's not unique in its peculiarities. There are others, scattered across the oldest parts of this land. They call them grief eaters in the old tongue. Not ghosts, Seth, not spirits. Something far older, far more organic." He leaned forward, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "These structures, they're not merely built. They grow, they settle, and once they take root, they begin to feed. On emotion, on memory, on the very sorrow that binds a family to its past. Like a living thing? More like a parasitic organism, a fungal growth of the soul. It doesn't want to kill you outright, Seth. It wants to keep you grieving, to keep you remembering. It learns your weaknesses, your deepest wounds. It becomes a reflection of your despair." The words echoed the realization I'd had moments before leaving the house. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a slow, deliberate consumption. He sighed, a long, weary sound. That's the difficult part. Some say fire, others complete demolition, to break its hold on the land. But even then, the essence, it's tenacious, and it fights back. It doesn't want its meal to walk away. As if on cue, a sudden blinding headache slammed into me. The diner lights flickered, then died, plunging the room into a sudden, disorienting gloom. A collective gasp rose from the other patrons. The archivist grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "It knows you're trying to sever the connection, Seth. Be careful. It will try to keep you." The next few hours were a blur of confusion and escalating fear. I remember the archivist urging me to leave town, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the house. But then, a sharp metallic tang filled my mouth. My legs buckled. Fluorescent lights, powered by a backup system, cast a sickly yellow glow on the institutional gray walls. My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat behind my eyes. I was lying on a cot, a thin blanket barely covering me. The door, a heavy steel slab, was closed, no handle on my side. I sat up, my muscles aching, my mind still reeling from the archivist's words. A grief eater, a parasitic entity. And now, I was here. No windows, just the constant thrum of emergency power. Had the house done this? Had it driven me to this point? Or had it orchestrated my removal, a twisted attempt to save its meal from escaping. Was it here? Had it followed me, its tendrils reaching out even to this sterile concrete box? The house, it seemed, had a long reach. And I was trapped, not just by four walls, but by the very thing I was trying to escape. I woke up to the oppressive hum of generators, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and damp concrete. I was lying on a cot, a thin, scratchy blanket doing little to ward off the chill seeping from the floor. My vision swam for a moment, the yellow light stretching into sickly streaks. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. Every joint ached, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that felt far more profound than just a night's sleep, or lack thereof. Had I truly been here all along? Was the house merely a figment of my fractured mind? If it was all in my head, then there was no escape, no entity to fight, just a slow, agonizing descent into madness. I swung my legs over the side of the cot, my bare feet hitting the rough concrete floor. I scanned the room. No windows, just the gray walls, a heavy metal door, and another cot, empty. Damp earth, old wood, the distinct musty aroma of the house. No, it couldn't be. I closed my eyes, willing it away. When I opened them, the smell lingered, a phantom presence. The hum of the generators, a constant thrumming beneath the floor, began to shift. It wasn't just a mechanical drone anymore. It sounded like a breath, a slow, deep inhalation and exhalation. My head snapped up. No one was there. It was her voice. Soft, melodious, the way she used to call my name when she found me lost in thought, hunched over blueprints late at night. My mind, desperate for comfort, wanted to believe. I could almost feel her presence, a light touch on my shoulder, the faint scent of her favorite jasmine perfume, cutting through the sterile disinfectant. My eyes welled up, blurring the already dim room. This was what the house did. It didn't just show me things. It reached into the deepest, most agonizing parts of my past and twisted them, made them real. I pressed my hands against my temples, squeezing my eyes shut. No, I rasped, the word tasting like ash. You're not real. It wasn't just memories. It was the feeling of those memories, intensified 1,000-fold, drowning me. I stumbled back against the cot, my legs weak. This was it. This was the house reaching for me, even here, in this supposedly secure, separate space. It was showing me that there was no separate space. Rest. It's so peaceful here. We can be together again. A profound weariness washed over me, a bone-deep fatigue that promised oblivion, an end to the ceaseless ache in my soul. The idea of surrendering, of simply letting the house take me, becoming another forgotten memory within its walls, felt incredibly tempting. To be reunited, even in this spectral, sorrow-fueled existence, seemed a small price to pay for the cessation of pain. My eyes drifted shut. The hum of the generators became a lullaby, the scent of jasmine a sweet, intoxicating perfume. But then, a flicker of defiance. I was an architect. I built structures. I understood foundations. And this house, this malevolent entity, was trying to tear down my foundation. It was manipulating my grief, yes, but it wasn't her. It was a parasite. I forced my eyes open. These were real. These were solid. Weak. You can't escape us. My head throbbed, but I found a strange resolve in the pain. I was determined. I would not let it consume me. Not like this. I was grieving, yes, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. I gripped the cot frame, knuckles white. It wanted my sorrow, my memories, and it was willing to drive me insane to get them. But in that moment, in the midst of the terrifying illusion, I understood its method. It was a predator, and my grief was its prey. And I would not be an easy meal. Less a torment, more a focal point. It was a reminder. a physical anchor to the strange resolve that had taken root deep inside me. I was grieving, yes, my heart a hollowed-out cavern where memories of my lost family echoed. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I gripped the cot frame, the cold metal digging into my palms, knuckles white. Absolute darkness pressed in from all sides. A tangible weight that seemed to vibrate with a low, almost inaudible hum. It wasn't the hum of machinery or distant traffic or even the wind. It was deeper, more organic, a sound that seemed to come from within the very walls. I shuffled forward, one hand outstretched, feeling for a wall. The concrete was cool and gritty beneath my fingertips. I expected to hear the faint whir of a generator, or the distant shouts of a supervisor, or even the rattling of pipes. But there was nothing, only that deep, resonant hum and my own ragged breathing. The silence was not empty. It was full, filled with a profound, oppressive stillness that felt entirely unnatural. Here, there was only the house. It wasn't just a place that amplified sorrow. It was something far more insidious. I ran my hand along the wall, searching for a seam, a doorframe, anything that suggested an exit. The concrete felt impossibly solid, unbroken. It curved slightly at the corners, seamlessly transitioning from wall to wall, as if poured from a single, continuous mold. No sharp angles, no discernible joints. I pressed against it, expecting a handle, a latch. Nothing. It was just a smooth, flat surface, utterly flush with the wall. I moved on, my heart beginning to accelerate, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. This wasn't right. This wasn't how a holding area or any building should be constructed. The house wasn't merely haunted by grief, it was made of it. It wasn't just a vessel for sorrow. It was a collector, a connoisseur. It drew in the pain of its inhabitants, not just to hold it, but to consume it. It fed on the raw, open wounds of loss, growing stronger with every tear, every sigh, every regret. The twisted visions, the manipulation of my memories. These weren't just echoes of the past. They were deliberate acts, carefully orchestrated by something that understood the deepest chambers of my heart. The house was alive. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Not sentient in a human sense, perhaps, but with a primal, predatory consciousness. It had been watching me, listening to my silent lamentations, savoring my despair. My own grief, the devastating sorrow over my family, was its sustenance. It had lured me here, not with promises of comfort or closure, but with the scent of my suffering, a feast laid out just for it. I stumbled back, my hands now clawing at the featureless walls, desperate to find an escape. It was as if the very concept of an outside had ceased to exist within these walls. My fingers, raw and aching, traced the unyielding surfaces. There were no doors, there were no windows, there were no seams. Completely, seamlessly. It wasn't a room in a building. It was a chamber, a living, breathing cell. The house hadn't just trapped me. It had grown around me. It had woven itself into an inescapable prison, built not of brick and mortar, but of my own anguish. I wasn't fighting a place that held bad memories. I was fighting an entity that was the memories, that was the sorrow, that was now a part of me too. It had burrowed deep, twisting my past, consuming my present, and now it had sealed my future. I was not just its captive, I was its next meal. And the terrifying realization was that it had been waiting for me all along. This was no inherited home. This was my tomb, meticulously crafted from my own pain, to make sense of the oppressive blackness. My hands, trembling, scraped along a surface that felt like rough, unsealed concrete, grimy with an ancient dust that coated my fingertips. The air was thick, heavy, carrying the metallic tang of old rust and the cloying sweetness of decay. a smell I'd learned to associate with the house's deepest, most forgotten corners. The silence was a tangible thing, pressing against my eardrums, making the subtle creaks and groans of the house, its very breathing sound amplified and monstrous. I tried to shout again, a raw, ragged sound, but it dissolved before it could fully form, leaving me with a dry, aching throat and a renewed sense of utter helplessness. Helplessness. That was the house's favorite meal, wasn't it? Not just sorrow, but the twisting, gnawing helplessness that came from being utterly consumed. This wasn't just a house. It was a living, breathing, malicious entity. And like any entity, it had a purpose, a mechanism, a way it sustained itself. My grief, my memories of the loss of my partner, had been the bait. The house hadn't just fed on them. It had rearranged them, twisted them into an inescapable labyrinth of guilt and despair. It was a parasitic structure, feeding on the very foundation of my being. But I was an architect. I understood structures. I understood how things were built, how they stood, and crucially, how they could be destabilized. I couldn't destroy the house, not physically. But if it was drawing its sustenance from my memories, from my mind, then perhaps I could sever that connection. The house wasn't just consuming my memories. It was rebuilding them, using my own grief as mortar and brick for its own psychic edifice. It was creating its own internal architecture within me, a prison constructed from my deepest fears and regrets. But if it was a structure, then it must have a core, a central point where its influence was most concentrated, or where its connection to me was strongest. A load-bearing wall, a central column, a key junction in its psychic blueprint. And if it was using my memories, then the key had to be my memories. I couldn't erase them, couldn't forget. That would be another form of surrender. But I could reclaim them. I could rebuild them on my own terms, not the house's. My hands, still pressed against the rough concrete, felt a faint vibration, a low thrumming that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth, or perhaps from the very bedrock of the house's malevolent existence. It wasn't the sound of machinery, but something far older, far more organic. It was a nerve center, or at least a major ganglion. A desperate plan began to form, raw and unrefined, but fueled by a surge of defiant determination. I couldn't demolish the house, but I could disrupt its internal mechanisms. I could find the main conduit, the psychic artery through which it pumped its poisoned memories into my mind, and I could sever it. Not with a hammer or a crowbar, but with a conscious, deliberate act of mental reconstruction. I would use my architectural knowledge not to build, but to deconstruct its hold on my inner landscape. I remembered the old blueprints, the hidden passages, the way the house seemed to fold in on itself, defying Euclidean geometry. It was a physical manifestation of a psychological trap. I needed to find the equivalent of a structural weakness, a fault line in its control. I would find a memory, a crucial one, that it had most corrupted, and I would consciously, painstakingly rebuild it, brick by psychic brick, into something it couldn't digest, something that was purely mine. A tremor ran through the floor, a deep guttural groan that vibrated through my bones. The house knew. It felt my defiance. And a fierce, almost exhilarated sense of purpose surged through me. I was an architect. I had built and I had seen structures fall. This house had built a prison around me, but I would use its own design against it. I would find its heart, its insidious core, and I would rip myself free. I pushed myself away from the wall, my muscles aching, but my resolve burning. My last stand would be built not of concrete and steel, but of memory and will. A smell I'd learned to associate with the house's deeper, more ancient corners. The air, thick and heavy, clung to my lungs, making each breath a deliberate effort. My hands, still scraping along that rough, unsealed concrete, confirmed I was in some kind of subterranean space, a raw, unfinished cavity beneath the familiar floors. It was the house's gullet, its processing chamber. A low thrum vibrated through the floor beneath my worn boots. A sound less mechanical than organic, like a vast, sluggish heart. The darkness here wasn't just the absence of light. It was a physical pressure, a living thing that pressed against my eyeballs, trying to force me into a blind, panicked retreat. But I wouldn't. Not this time. It was a potent symbol, a raw nerve, and I intended to use it as a scalpel. I had come here, into the very maw of this entity, not to escape, but to confront. My plan, forged in the terror and clarity of recent nights, was simple and terrifying. I would offer it everything it craved, every raw nerve ending, every shred of sorrow, and then I would deny it. I would starve it with an abundance it couldn't digest. The house was testing me, pushing its tendrils into the fresh wound of my grief. I gripped the locket tighter, its cold metal digging into my palm. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I miss her every day." The whisper sharpened, coalescing into a single sorrowful tone, the exact timbre of my lost love's voice. "You could have saved her. You could have done more." A familiar agony twisted in my gut. The house was trying to pull me back into that familiar, crushing spiral of guilt and regret. I squeezed my eyes shut, not to block out a vision, but to focus inward. I had replayed that day 1,000,000 times, dissected every decision, every second. A faint, sickeningly sweet scent, like wilted funeral flowers and stagnant water, intensified. Suddenly I felt her presence beside me, a phantom weight, a warmth that wasn't there. It was a perfect, insidious illusion, designed to shatter my resolve, to make me yearn for what was lost so intensely that I'd give myself over to the house entirely. My breath hitched, my throat tightened. This was the hardest part. To acknowledge the beauty of the memory, the profound love, and yet to deny the house its parasitic grip on the sorrow. I opened my eyes, staring into the impenetrable blackness. "I remember her," I said, my voice now loud, echoing slightly in the vast space. I remember her smile. I remember the way she looked at me. I remember the joy. The phantom warmth vanished, replaced by a sudden sharp drop in temperature. "You forgot her." "No," I shouted, the word ripping from my chest. This was the reveal, the core of my plan. The house didn't want grief. It wanted despair. It wanted the grief to fester, to rot into something unusable, something that would consume me entirely. My grief was mine. It was a testament to the love I'd felt, not a weakness to be exploited. "I remember her," I repeated, my voice now a defiant roar. "And I accept the pain of her absence. I accept that it happened. I accept that I loved her, and that love still exists, even without her physical presence." I clutched the locket to my chest, not as a symbol of loss, but as a vessel of enduring love. My grief is not a cage. It is a scar, and it reminds me that I lived, and I loved. The air around me crackled with an unseen energy. The cloying sweetness turned acrid, like burning hair and ozone. The house was reeling. It had expected me to drown, to be consumed by the memories, to offer my despair as a feast. Instead, I had offered it my acceptance, my raw, unvarnished grief, stripped of its corrosive power. I had offered it something it couldn't metabolize. The tremors grew violent, shaking the very concrete around me. I had made my sacrifice. I had confronted my deepest wound, and by truly accepting it, by owning it, I had denied the house its sustenance. Now I just needed to find a way out of its gut. The low thrumming beneath my feet faltered, then intensified into a jarring, violent tremor. The air around me crackled with an unseen energy. The house was reeling. It had expected me to drown, to be consumed by the memories, to offer myself up as another meal. But I hadn't. I had fought. I had remembered. And now, it was choking. The walls around me groaned, a sound like ancient timber splintering under immense pressure. Dust, thick and choking, rained down from the ceiling, mingling with the metallic tang of ozone. The very structure seemed to be convulsing, a monstrous organism in its death throes, or perhaps its frantic resistance. I stumbled, clutching at a nearby doorframe, the wood rough and splintered against my palm. The floor beneath me bucked, threatening to throw me off balance. This wasn't just a physical tremor. I could feel it in my bones, a psychic scream reverberating through the very fabric of the house. My defiance, my refusal to succumb, had poisoned its sustenance. It fed on sorrow, yes, but it craved surrender. It wanted the willing descent into despair, the quiet acceptance of an all-consuming grief. My anger, my fight, was an indigestible shard in its gut. A sickening crack echoed from somewhere above, followed by a shower of plaster and the distinct sound of a beam giving way. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, as if the house's deepest, most hidden parts were suddenly exposed. I coughed, my throat raw. This wasn't just a tremor. It was a desperate, thrashing attempt to dislodge me, to crush me, to reassert its dominance. I pushed forward, navigating the shifting corridor. My mind, usually so precise, so orderly, felt stretched and frayed, but a core of grim determination remained. I wouldn't be another echo in its halls. I rounded a corner, propelled by a sudden violent lurch of the floor. Before me, the corridor opened into a vast cavernous space I didn't recognize. It was dimly lit, not by electricity, but by faint, sickly green phosphorescence clinging to the damp walls. This was it, I realized with a chilling certainty. The name, whispered into my mind, not by the house, but by some deep, intuitive part of myself, sent a shiver down my spine. This was where it gathered its nourishment, where it held the essence of its victims before fully consuming them. And now, during the power outage, a literal outage I saw, as a bare bulb hanging precariously from a frayed wire flickered weakly, then died, it was vulnerable. The green glow was the house's own dying light, its exposed nerve. The air here was colder, heavy with a profound sadness, the accumulated despair of generations. I could almost taste the bitterness on my tongue. But amidst the debris, I saw something else. Faint, ethereal forms, like shimmering heat haze, coalesced and dispersed, wailing silently. They weren't solid, not ghosts in the traditional sense, but lingering impressions, captured emotions, the true memories the house fed upon. This was the reveal. The house wasn't just a passive receptacle, it was a grinder, a processor. It didn't just hold grief, it refined it, extracted its essence, and then perhaps dispersed the husks. And these shimmering forms were the raw material, trapped in this holding area, unable to move on, unable to be fully consumed because the house itself was faltering. These weren't just abstract memories. They were fragments of souls, held captive. The tremor intensified again, and one of the shimmering forms nearest to me flickered violently, then vanished, like a candle snuffed out. The house was losing its grip, but it was also destroying what it held. I had to get out. Not just for myself, but to break its hold, to disrupt its cycle. My gaze swept across the cavernous space. The far wall, unlike the others, seemed less organic, more like a crude, temporary barrier. This was my chance. I started running, my feet crunching over shattered ceramic and splintered wood. The ground beneath me continued to heave, making every step a gamble. The air was thick with the dust of crumbling plaster and the acrid smell of ozone, a constant reminder of the house's struggle. The wailing of the ethereal forms grew louder, a chorus of despair, as if they too sensed the impending change. either their liberation or their final dissolution. A section of the ceiling directly above me groaned ominously. I threw myself forward, narrowly avoiding a cascade of debris that crashed down where I had been standing moments before. My ankle twisted, sending a jolt of pain through me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The opening in the far wall grew larger with each tremor, a ragged tear in the house's very fabric. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, but the thought of freedom, of escaping this sentient prison, fueled me. I reached the opening, a jagged maw of broken stone and exposed earth. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, I squeezed through, scraping my skin on the rough edges. I tumbled out, landing hard on damp soil, gasping for breath. The world outside was a muted gray, the first hint of dawn painting the horizon. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the bruised sky, the vastness of it a dizzying contrast to the enclosed horror I had just escaped. I lay there for a long time, my body aching, my mind reeling. It stood there, silhouetted against the nascent light, no longer a malevolent presence, but a silent, brooding monolith. The violent tremors had ceased. The strange lights were gone. It looked dormant, harmless, but I knew better. The scars of its embrace were etched into my mind, my soul. The grief for my lost loved one was still there, a dull ache, but it was mine now. It wasn't a weapon for the house to wield. It was a part of me, a terrible truth I finally had to face, but on my own terms. The house hadn't been destroyed. It had merely been weakened, its power disrupted. It would wait. It would always wait for another sorrowful soul to wander into its embrace. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the air filling my lungs with a sense of fragile, hard-won freedom. The long journey of true processing, of healing, was just beginning, and I would carry the echoes of that house, its insatiable hunger, with me forever. But I was out, and that, for now, was enough. I turned my back on the silent sentinel and started walking, one painful step after another towards the rising sun.